Hello everyone, here I am. I'm continuing the lecture 1 that I unfortunately wasn't able to finish. Here we are leaving off with the coding Python console input and output section. First, what we're going to show is getting user input from the console. This is done with the input built-in function. It prompts the user for an input and returns the user's response as a string. So let's do an example from scratch using Atom. I've installed Atom. I'm going to open it. And the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to make a new file. What I should do is I have to make sure I save it. And it's good to make a new folder for, say for example, if I was making homework 1, I'd make a folder. Every program you make needs to end in the .py extension. So then what's nice here is that in Atom, I have my file browser. It's right here, shows homework 1. So this is the variable I want to store. And I use the input function, and my prompt is going to be enter a string. And to echo it back out, I'm going to use the print function. And just for a demo, I'm going to multiply it by 2, which will repeat it 2 times. So now I'm going to save it, which is important. And then to run it, I'm going to open up a terminal. Whatever terminal application your operating system has. This can be a Linux terminal, it can be Windows PowerShell. So I'll have to know where my file is when I run it, of course. So I use the interpreter, and I can pass it the absolute path to my file. Homework 1, input output pi. And here's that prompt I got. You can see it's a little annoying because I forgot to put a space in there. But that's what I got. So I might want to make it a little nicer. Make the prompt look like that. So again, I would run it in the console like this, and then it looks a little nicer. So what the input function does is that it waits for the user input until it encounters the new line. Here is my input, and then I'm hitting the return or enter key. It got everything before I hit new line. If you're working in a directory often, like the homework directory, you can cd into it. Oops. And then you can just pass it the relative path name. I'm hitting enter again. There we go. So that's how the input function works. It's pretty straightforward. Stores your input into this variable. Here's another example. This is my addition machine. First, I'm going to print my starting prompt. And what I meant to show here is that you can call this input multiple times to get multiple input. So let's do this in the console again, or in the file again, I beg your pardon. So print my starting prompt. I get 2 input values. The other thing I wanted to emphasize is that to do this addition operation, first I need to convert them to ints. Recall that the input operator returns a string, so to do an addition properly, I need to convert it to an int. Right? Now I'm going to do it again. Here's my addition machine. First operand's 5, second operand's 2, sum is 7. And I'm doing it here too. Okay, so I've done this a lot without explaining it, but I've been using the print function to show console output. So it takes an arbitrary number of variables and prints them all on one line, and it automatically converts every variable to a string. Here's what I mean. Excuse me. So I'm just using the print statement, and I'm giving it an arbitrary number of operands. So now when I run it, it's printing all the operands that I gave it. It's converting them to strings. I can mix different object types. There we go. You'll notice that everything's separated by a space, which is a nice default behavior. There are extra options called keyword options. This will be the first that you'll encounter. So I can change what's called the separator argument. And then they're printed separated by this colon. The other thing to notice is, let's add another line here. By default, these 2 print statements are separated by a new line. That new line is automatically in there. But I can change the behavior of it again with the end option. So the default is a new line, but I can just give it an empty string. There we go. So, and then you should see everything on one line now, just like that. Typically the space and the new line respectively are what you want, but you have the option to change it. It's quite flexible. So here are 2 examples. Let's make this a little smaller. Okay. So here I'm printing over, under, through. The default separator is a space. Here I've provided the separator and, over, under, and through. So here I have x equals 3 and y equals 7. And I'm printing the result of this. So I've got an x, I've got a division sign, which is a string, I've got y, which is another integer. And then what you'll notice here is that I'm computing x over y, and it just returns the result and prints it. You can chain operations like that a lot. It's very useful. The next thing we're going to talk about are the common Python errors you might see as you're working. I just want you to be able to recognize them if you see them. The most common one you'll see is what's called a syntax error. And this happens when your code can't be parsed. It often happens when you've missed parentheses. So let's take a look at this. So here I am back in Atom. So I'm going to import math, and then I want to do a long operation. I want to print the sine of 60 degrees. What I'm doing here is I have 60 degrees. I'm going to convert it to radians. I'm going to get the sine of it and print it. A lot of nested parentheses here. You'll notice that the nice thing about Atom and most text editors is that as I was typing, it completed the parentheses for me. It's a great feature. So, oops. Ignore that. So, this is what I meant to show, is using the wrong function. And this should be the answer. I'm going to assume that it is. So, suppose I was typing and I missed a parentheses, right? The error I would get is, oops, I forgot to save. Save it. The error I would get is a syntax error. This one's a little bit hard to see exactly what it was pointing to. But this thing, unexpected EOF, typically means you've got a syntax error. And the other hint, of course, is that syntax error is specified. So this is a little bit more descriptive here. I'm doing the same thing. And then when I run it, I get an unexpected EOF there. End of file. So don't be scared when you see this. Just realize that you've got some sort of syntax error, meaning that you've, maybe forgotten an operator or a parentheses. The other common type of error is an indentation error that'll happen when you make indentation mistakes. For example, I've mixed tabs and spaces here. This actually shows a tab character, but these are 4 spaces. And then when I run this, it'll say indentation error, unindent doesn't match any outer indentation level. This might happen. Even if you have spaces. Here we have print C and print C times 2. Now, again, you'll notice that the IDE saved me from that mistake because as I was typing, it automatically indented. Let's take a look. So I'm putting a new line by hitting enter. It automatically indented. Now, I might make a mistake by, say, it's hard to make a mistake, like this. There we go. And then this is the error. Indentation error. Unindent doesn't match any outer indentation level. That's because these indentations need to line up exactly. That's how this block inside the for loop is identified. Another common syntax error is a name error, and that happens when you try to reference a name that doesn't exist. We saw this before. Probably the most common time that this will appear is when you make a typo. This shows the typo. I've got a variable called this year. I want to increment it, but I misspelled it. So when it says name error, that's not defined. So let's try writing it in the text editor. This year equals 2019. Next year equals this year. And once again, the text editor Atom has auto suggest to make this kind of error less common. +1. But if I did it like this, I had a typo, which is still very common. There, I get this error. So again, don't be scared when you see a name error. It's pointing you to a good mistake. Not a good mistake, but the mistake. So another type of error is known as the type error. A type error is raised when an operator doesn't support a type of operand. I've alluded to this before. Whereas a string times an integer is supported, string divided by an integer is not supported. And now the error you'll get is unsupported operand type. Again, see what we got here. Foo divided by 2. Try to print it. Print foo divided by 2. And I'm going to save. Saving's important. Then I'm going to run it again. So what happened there? Invalid syntax. It's funny. Oh, I understand why that's a syntax error. Because I didn't even have another operand there. Save it again. There we go. Unsupported operands for type string. Unsupported operand types for the division operator, string, and int. So in showing you these, my intent was just to encourage you not to panic when you see these error messages. Error messages from Python are a lot more useful than error messages from many other languages. So when you see an error, just take a minute, take a deep breath, and just try to parse this error message a little bit. It'll help you out quite a bit. Okay. So the recommended reading for today, what you should probably do is definitely focus on Think Python. The way of the program, variables, expression statements, and strings. I also encourage you to look at the Python docs for the math module and string methods. They're super useful. I encourage you to get into the habit of reading the docs. And optional, if you really want to dig deeper, is some chapters from Learning Python about numeric types, string fundamentals, and for loops. But those are pretty optional. So what we have for the homework, let's go to piazza.com. And then everything should be in the resources section. I'm doing them through Dropbox. So your lecture notes should be up here. Eventually I'll show you how to read IPython notebooks. But I generate these PDFs that has all the information. It's a little verbose, but it has all the information on there. And you can download them to your pleasure. Those are the lectures. Then your homework is also here. So here's what you've got. So like I said, this first assignment is going to be, you're just going to email it to me, talk about GitLab later. First problem is doing that doodle poll. Do that doodle poll. Next problem is this. You're going to write a program that takes a person's name as input, then displays it with corrected capitalization. So I'm going to get you started with this, of course. So I've got homework 1. Going to make a new file. I'm going to call it. I'm going to save it as problem01.py. Okay, great. And then name is going to be input, enter a name. And there I'm just echoing out the name. Well, what you do is do some stuff here to change name. And then I've got problem 2. So what you should be able to do is you should be able to run it problem1.py, enter a name, run, and I didn't do anything there. But the idea is that if I had something like this, I wouldn't want it to be printed like this. I want it to be printed like this with the correct punctuation. I mean capitalization. The next problem is to write a program that asks for a word in an integer, then displays the word repeated that many times. So my program's asking for down. So I've specified down, and I specified the number of times to repeat. And it spits out this. Oops, sorry. To get you started, so you're going to get word from input, get int from input. Then what you're eventually going to do is you're going to multiply your word times your, let's call it n times. N times. Super easy. And it's just getting stuff from input. So this one's going to be a little bit more involved. What you're going to do is that the program's going to ask for an angle in degrees and report the sine, cosine, and tangent of that angle. You're going to need to use these functions from the math module, and this is how you use them. You can also refer to the lecture to show you how to use them. So your program's going to look like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run my reference solution. Let's make this bigger. Dropbox, MPCS, immersion programming, homework solutions, problem 3. Oops. There we go, problem3.py. Okay, so I'm entering an angle in degrees, so I'm going to say 180 degrees. That's what it'll spit out. So the cosine of 180 degrees is -1. The reason it says pi here is that it was converted to radians. So that's okay. This is what I mentioned in lecture. This should be 0, but it's not exactly 0 because of floating point arithmetic. So the last one is going to write a program that asks for a word and displays the reversed word. There are many ways to reverse a string in Python, but for this assignment, your solution must follow these requirements. It must not use indexing or slicing, which we haven't covered anyway, and it must not use the range, reverse, or enumerate operators. We haven't learned those already. The intent was just, if you know Python already, don't use them. Should be able to do this fairly easily with what we've already learned about for loops and string operations. So I've also given you a challenge problem. It's not required or graded, but you can take a look at this. Just if you're feeling like this is not enough of a challenge for you, this will give you something interesting to do in the meantime. It's not required or graded. But these 4 problems should all be zipped up, like I said, in a file called your CNET.IDE, and just send it to me. And these are all available on the Piazza page. So, thanks for listening to this. I apologize for going over, but if you have any follow-up questions, ask Piazza, ask me, and good luck.